Good morning, all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So let's start with our today's discussion for 9th of January 2023. So the first news article is regarding sinking Joshimath, and PMO reviews the situation. So the entire, we can say, the reason behind the situation is unplanned urban development, and then residents, they are blaming the NTPC's Tapovan Vishnugad power project for the damage to the sacred town in Uttarakhand, and they demand proactive resettlement steps by the government. And also, the members of the NDMA would be visiting the region. Then we are also seeing that fake Indian COVID vaccines, medicines, they are flooding China's black market, and fake versions of the Indian generic medicines, they are flooding because obviously the COVID-19 cases are increasing in China and there is high demand of the medicines. So firstly, we need to verify this thing, and then we need to ensure that such trade does not happen, and we need to curb the root cause of this. So there is growing trade in fake antiviral medications. So that is one development. And Mahadai River, it is also known as the Mandovi River. It is there in the state of Goa. So you should be knowing about this also. Then talking about M sand or manufactured sand. So West Bengal gets its first manufacturing sand facility through the Coal India Limited's green mining initiative. So promoting green mining through setting up the manufacturing sand facility in West Bengal. So it's an attempt toward environmental sustainability and reducing over mining of sand, and the facility has been started in West Bengal to produce this manufactured sand. So sand is one of the major geological resources of the country, and M sand it's a form of an artificial sand that is manufactured by crushing large hard stones into fine particles, and that's how we can say we are promoting, or this initiative is going to promote green mining, which is a step towards environmental sustainability and reducing over mining, which definitely leads to more of soil erosion and hampers, we can say, the soil structure. And coming to the editorial section, firstly, we see that the decadal census that had to be conducted in 2021, but it was delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and still it is being delayed. So this article is focusing upon we need to avoid further delay in conducting this census because of several reasons. So what are the reasons? So firstly, we look about what our constitution says about the census. So it says that the use of census data for delimitation of constituencies and for determining the quantum of reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So firstly, we use the census data for the delimitation exercise, and then we see that, however, it does not say, that constitution does not say what should be the periodicity of the census, but we are conducting the census in every 10 years. And the Census Act of 1948, it, which predates the constitution, also provides the legal background for several activities relating to the census without mentioning anything about its periodicity. So neither this act nor the constitution mentions anything about the periodicity of the census, and this provision puts the onus of deciding when to conduct a census on the executive, that is the union government. And talking about the implications of the delay, so census alone, it is the only, we can say, data source that alone provide population data for every village and town in the country. So for micro level, the data that we can get is only through census, and there are sample surveys also conducted, which can, we can say, they are another source of reliable data on social and demographic indicators only at higher geographic levels. So for micro level data, census is the only source, and census has also been providing data on population characteristics, housing, and amenities. So that is also there. And for answers to questions on the improvement in literacy rate, educational levels, economic activity, migration, and likewise, the impact, and also assessing and analyzing the impact of programs like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, we must depend on sample surveys. But these surveys, the sample surveys, they have limitations and they cannot be used to find answers to how many villages have literacy rates below 75%. So again, for that micro level analysis, we are dependent upon the census data, and such information is important to initiate action to rectify the situation. So whatever are the challenges and the problems after implementing, obviously we need to improve upon them, but once we have the data, we are actually aware about what is the situation and what are the problems, then only we can go ahead with rectification. So for that also, the census data becomes important. And in case of panchayats and municipal bodies, the reservation of seats for SCs and STs is based upon their proportion in the population, and again this data comes from census. So on the other hand, census other than the census, there is no other source that can provide this information. And talking about delimitation of the parliamentary and the assembly constituencies, that would continue to be based on 2001 census till data from a census after 2026 are published. So this exercise is going to be conducted after a census that would be held after 2026. So that should be in 2031. And the rural urban distribution of the population has been rapidly changing over the years. So there is a high population growth in the urban areas. So accordingly, we need to take steps, but for that, we need to have sufficient data and analysis in order to come out with any policy or a scheme to deal with anything or any providing benefits to the population accordingly. And the pandemic, it resulted in deaths among adults and the aged relatively more than the children. So its impact on age distribution is in severely affected areas would be of interest, as it would also give an indirect estimates of the number of deaths that were published. So in this case also, the importance of census is there. And talking about the national population register and the census, so the decision to collect data for the national population register by piggybacking on the census operations was the most debated issue. So this thing was debated, and the central government stated that the data for the national population register would be updated during the census exercise. So it would be advisable to separate these two things and disassociate the census from a politically sensitive issue. And before that, obviously, so before any census that is conducted after 2026, because that would be having, we can say it would be in a politically charged environment, because it would be the data on the basis of which there would be delimitation exercise, and definitely it would be hampered by certain political interests. So we, before that census, post 2026, we need a census on which we can rely on a major level. So that is the entire thing about why we need not further delay the census exercise, and what are the important provisions that our constitution and the Census Act of 1948 says about it. Then talking about the rehabilitation, okay, so the recent orders for eviction in different places, we have seen it for Haldwani region, we are seeing it in the state of Assam also, and that is the thing. So the article is saying that Supreme Court, it must lay down rehabilitation norms for eviction from the public spaces. So we need to have a set of norms which will be defining how the rehabilitation exercise should be there, what all components must be there in any rehabilitation package for the people who would be evicted from a place. So recently Supreme Court it halted the forcible eviction of some 50,000 people from Haldwani in Uttarakhand, and that's how Supreme Court intervened. So majorly it is concerning the rehabilitation package, how it should be formulated and what all components should be there, and how we need to ensure that the people's fundamental rights are not violated because of any from any eviction drive, and they should also not be forcefully evicted from a place. And again, in the Joshimat region, also people, they are being shifted to another places. So even in that case, we can say that we need to have rehabilitation norms. So the norm or the importance of rehabilitation norms and set of rules becomes important because we are seeing an increase in the eviction drives. So we see a shortage of housing and as well as inadequate recognition of the right to shelter means that large masses of people they encroach on the vacant land that they find, and be it on a bed of water bodies or the government property. So in order to ensure that people they are not encroaching upon the government property, we need to ensure that firstly they have adequate houses and also need to recognize their right to shelter. So in future will not have to conduct such eviction drives, and there are court judgments that stress rehabilitation measures and consultation with the oustees before the eviction. So such we can say such discussions also becomes important, and India does not have a good record on rehabilitation of those evicted from public spaces, and this case presents an opportunity for the Supreme Court to lay down the law on meaningful rehabilitation as well as effective prevention of encroachments. Then this article is very, we can say, fundamental, very practical in today's time given our lifestyle. So making healthy choice the easier choice. So making a healthy choice should be made an easier choice for the people, and we'll be looking at how our food habits are defined and how our today's lifestyle it is, we can say, not obviously good for our health. So our health must be the first priority for ourselves, and we see that do you eat 5 servings, that is approximately 400 to 500 grams of fruits and vegetables, or do 30 minutes of physical activity in a day? So this is a question that this article is posing to everyone, and chances are that obviously it does not seem that people are more engaged in doing physical activities or exercising every day, or having or consuming sufficient amount of fruits and vegetables. So according to 2017-18 national NCD monitoring survey, it reported that 98% of Indians they do not take adequate fruits and vegetables. 98%. So this is huge and it's very stark. And only 59% of the adults they do adequate physical activity. So given these numbers, it is very well possible that the number of obese people and obese children would increase, and then would be seeing certain lifestyle disorders and diseases because of such unhealthy lifestyle that we are practicing. And these choices they are heavily influenced by the environment we live in. So the environment shapes our, we can say, our choices regarding the food habits and our lifestyle. So it is important that we have more number of choices so that we shift our food habits. So in that case, finding a snack which is neither fried nor salty in a restaurant is nearly impossible. So again, this is pointing towards the fact that we need to incorporate and bring in the restaurants and have discussions and come up with offering more choices to the people when it comes to the food choices that is offered by the restaurant. So we need more choices for people to be able to eat healthy without compromising the choices of others. So that is one thing how we can reach out to people. And also surveys have shown that unhealthier choices they are available more, they're priced lower, and they're displayed more prominently in grocery stores to promote their buying, because ultimately the private firms their main motive is to earn profits. So we see this, and obviously this is not, we can say, going to be good for our health in longer term, and there are two main reasons behind this. So firstly, our culturally our diet is so cereal or pulse based that there is very less scope for adding the fruits and vegetables or healthier options in our diet. So one is the cultural reason, and the second is the affordability issue. So our food environment is configured in a way that promotes unhealthy options and dissuades healthy choices. So that is about our cultural practices, about our cultural way that our diets are shaped, and The second reason is the affordability. So we'll be looking at how we need to promote healthier lifestyle options to the people and what steps can be taken in this regard. So the physical, economic and socio-cultural environments in which we make decisions about purchasing, preparing and consuming food or doing physical activity, they are unsupportive of the healthy choices. So can these environments be shaped differently? Yes, definitely. There is sufficient evidence globally that there are many policy level interventions that can help create an enabling environment. So these includes regulatory measures, taking fiscal measures and using fiscal instruments, as well as structural and educational interventions to promote healthier choices. So firstly, talking about what can be the regulatory approach. So this is best exemplified by regulating marketing of foods to children. So definitely our food habit gets influenced about as and when we see more number of advertisements about junk food, or that is obviously being promoted through advertisements on TV, on OTT platform, on social media. So firstly we need to regulate the marketing of the food that we are focusing more upon. So many countries, they have banned or they have restricted the advertising of food and beverages to children on television. And secondly, regulating the salt content in butter, cheese, chips, etc. It is another area for regulation which requires our attention. And India is currently exploring front of pack food labeling by self-regulation by the industry. And then talking about the affordability question, so it is an important consideration for eating healthy. So for addressing this affordability issue, we need fiscal measures, and that includes taxing the junk food. We can incentivize healthier options and we can subsidize fruits and vegetables so that they become more affordable, and laying more footpaths, making more walkables by having them low, keeping them clean, removing the obstructions and maintaining parks, which can be done by the municipalities. So in order to promote more of physical activities on regular basis by the people. And commercial interests like the food industry, they are powerful interest groups. They do not want their profits to decline, so they just want to continue as things are changing and shaping. And along with improving awareness of the people about making healthy choices, we also need to educate the relevant stakeholders. So working with the restaurants to promote healthier preparation of the food is one thing, and India has not really explored these multifaceted policy interventions to address the issues of diet and physical activity choices. So we should be going ahead with the several options in front of us, and ultimately to make healthier choices easy for people, policymakers, they must exercise difficult choices that are there. And also if more people they opt for healthy choices, then industry would not be having any other choice but to respond and to keep its market share intact. So that's how we can also bring in and change the things, the foods that are produced by the industry, as and when they will see that people they are showing more, we can say, interest or more affinity towards healthier food options. So definitely industry would have to change its production of the goods that they are producing, the food that they are producing. So that is all about this, and it is one of the very important articles, I would say. And then we also see on similar lines that younger diabetics, they are on the rise in some states. So again, it points towards the unhealthy lifestyle that we practice. And in more than 20 states, the share of young persons with high blood glucose levels, they have increased in the last 5 years. And this is not a good indicator. Then we see that despite the Supreme Court order, single women they are denied abortion. So the situation on the ground, it remains dismal, because firstly we'll see what were the amendments and the developments that happened. So the MTP Act, that is the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Amendment Act 2021, it introduced a key change in Section 3 by extending the upper limit for termination of pregnancy from 20 to 24 weeks for special categories. And the top court, it went a step further, ruling that the marital status should not be a barrier for women to seek an abortion up to 24 weeks of pregnancy. So this was a Supreme Court ruling, but we see that the situation on the ground it remains dismal, and women they are having to run from pillar to post to seek abortion. So it would have been better if the court had directed the government to change the rules in accordance with the judgment. So we do not see any change or any amendment in the law that is there on similar lines, on the basis of which the Supreme Court delivered a judgment that the marital status is not going to matter, and even single women they can go ahead with abortion with a limit of 24 weeks of pregnancy. But this change is not reflected in the legislation, and that's why we are seeing that the single women they are not able to go ahead with the abortion. So unless the rules, the act in the act they get changed in black and white, we have a clear picture, because the doctors they get confused because there's no such provision as of now in the law. So women they will find it difficult to seek abortion in health facilities. And right now the rule 3 of the MTP amendment rules 2021, they do not permit single woman to abort after 20 weeks. So that is the rule is there, and this needs to be amended. And it only allows special categories, including the survivors of sexual assault, minors, widows, and divorcees, women with disabilities, a malformed fetus, or women stuck in humanitarian emergencies to access abortion post 20 weeks. So this is the condition and all these situations. So under section 3 of IPC, termination of pregnancy is a criminal act if it does not fulfill the MTP condition. So because of this, the doctors they fear going ahead with the abortion in case of single women. And with the law not amended, this has a chilling effect on doctors when the police they are not aware of the recent Supreme Court judgment. So even the police lacks awareness. So we need to spread more awareness amongst the stakeholders, and also need to bring in this change as per the Supreme Court judgment in the law, that is the MTP Act. So that's it from the Hindu. Now we'll take a Financial Express. So in Financial Express, there are extremely important articles and things to be discussed today. So firstly, we see that trade settlement in rupees. So the countries they that is the countries for which settlement of trade in local currencies has been approved, that will be able to firstly save the dollars, and it would be reducing our dependence upon dollars in the South Asian region in particular, and also outside the South Asian region, for whom the forex reserves in dollars is a matter of concern. So this is in a way we are trying to promote trade settlements in rupees. And in this context, there is Vostro account, so you can find out more about how they function. And also we have set up Vostro accounts with Russia also. Now, coming to this article, it is focusing upon the doubling of the farmers' income. So farmers, they have again threatened an agitation if their demands are not met. So their key demands includes fixing of a profitable rate of return over the production cost for all the crops and ensuring its implementation. They are also asking for higher income support under the PM Kisan Yojana, among other demands. So this suggests that the narrative of the agrarian distress, it still persists, with the farmer income which is coming under severe stress. And the income of the farmers is also low relative to the income of the non-agricultural workers. So that is one thing. Then farmers, they are burdened by indebtedness. And 7 years ago, the Prime Minister, he outlined the idea of doubling the farmers' income by 2022, which remains unmet. So the issue then is whether farmers' real income, it has really doubled in the last 7 years or not. So The current regime, it states that its policy interventions in this regard, it has yielded very positive results, but the difficulty in putting out the hard numbers is that we do not have estimates of the farmers income, which are published by the National Statistical Office. And also, a Niti Aayog member, he said that the real income of farmers, it may increase by around 70% through June 2023. However, will be unsuccessful in doubling the farmers' income as per the target that was outlined 7 years ago. And the higher increase in the farmers' income is plausible only if the number of cultivators have declined over this period. That would have led to increase in the marginal productivity of the farmers, but this cannot be verified again because we do not have any data regarding this. And also, forget about doubling the farmer's income. If there was even a significant increase in real farmer income, why would farmers, they would have threatened an agitation now? So that is, we can say, the situation on ground. And holdings also, they are, we can say, diminishing in size gradually. And there's a need to set up investments not just in the crop cultivation but also in the livestock and the fishing sector. And we need to promote crop diversification from staple cereals to high value crops that can boost the farmer's income, and millets can be one such example. So there is big challenge for the government policy is to build more irrigation facilities so that our dependence upon monsoon reduces. And that too, irrigational facilities, they have to be sustainable with the environment. We can go ahead with micro irrigation, with sprinkler irrigation, and we can promote hydroponics. So likewise, and there's also a need to prepare for extremely heavy as well as a poor rainfall scenario, and develop drought resistant and short duration crops. So again, millets, they are, we can say, they bestly fit into this situation. And in case of short duration crops also, we have GM mustard. So the new varieties that are being developed, they are having, we can say, short gestational period, and we need to promote and spend and allocate more funds to agricultural research and development. So that's how we can go ahead in order to promote increase in the real farmers income and ensure that it gets doubled as soon as possible. Then there is one more article which is very important today. So here you can see that all the important terms that are related to the budget are given, and all these become very important for prelims and even for interviews. So because you should be clear with the meaning of each and every term that is there in front of you. So we'll go through each and every one, and let's start with what is GDP, that is the gross domestic product. So GDP is the monetary value of the final goods. So the first keyword is final goods and services, though those are consumed by the final user and produced within the geography of a country in a given period of time. Say it can be a quarter or on yearly basis. And sorry, it also includes some no market production, such as certain defense, education, and health services provided by the government, but it excludes unpaid work. So, unpaid work, such as the voluntary household work and also the black market activities, because they are not tracked and it is black, it's parallel economy. So, these things are not included in GDP calculation. So, GDP also takes into account wear and tear of the capital stock, that is machinery, that is the depreciation. So that is GDP. Then coming to nominal GDP and real GDP. So nominal GDP, it reflects the current value of the currency, which is unadjusted for inflation or deflation. So the nominal GDP is unadjusted for inflation. Basically, it takes into account the inflation also. And when we talk about the real GDP, so we can say the real situation is what we get through the real GDP. So how do you get real GDP? When you subtract inflation from the nominal GDP, you get the real GDP, and real GDP eliminates the distortion that is caused by inflation. So that is the meaning of real and nominal GDP. And what is the utility? Why do we calculate the nominal GDP? So the nominal GDP is used to compare nations' output with other factors. It can be like public debt, it can be government budget deficits or surplus, then current account surplus or deficit, and the tax collected. So in order to compare all these things, we calculate nominal GDP. So these factors, they are not inflation adjusted, and that's how we can say what is the utility of nominal GDP is. And then talking about the gross national product. So gross national product, it counts all the output of the residents of a country. Now this here when we talk about GDP and GNP, so in GDP we were talking about that whatever final goods are produced within the boundaries of a country is what forms GDP. But in case of GNP, it is not limited to the geographical boundaries of a country. It is talking about all the output that is produced by the residents of India. So in case of India, whether the people located out of India, they are working and they are contributing, so even that would be included under GNP. So it is equal to GDP plus the net income from the foreign investments of the residents. So that is how we get GNP. Then talking about inflation, so inflation, it is the sustained increase in the general price level in the economy, and obviously with more and more inflation, the purchasing power gets eroded. And the inflation indexes that we use in India are the CPI and the WPI, and the opposite of inflation is deflation, which occurs when the prices, they start declining, and that leads to increase in our purchasing power. Then talking about public debt. So public debt is basically, we can say, however or whatever is the amount that the government borrows. So whatever is the total liabilities of a government, of the union government and the state governments, is what forms the public debt. So we calculate, the measure that we use is debt to GDP ratio. So the target that was set out in the FRBM Act was 60%. That was 40% for the center and 20% for the states by 2022-23. But obviously, because of COVID-19, we have been unable to achieve this target. So right now, the ratio, it had peaked up to 89% in financial year 2021, and right now it is at 83.4% in the current financial year. So that is there. And talking about budget estimates and the revised estimates, so budget estimates, they are made at a time, at the time of presentation of the budget, regarding the allocation of funds for different tasks and the revenue inflows. And when you again revise those budget estimates, you get the revised estimates. So these are made during the course of the year on the basis of the fund requirements cited by the agencies concerned. Then we come to understanding of the revenue deficit or surplus, and the gross fiscal deficit and gross primary deficit. So here the revenue deficit or surplus is simply the excess of revenue expenditure over the revenue receipts. And talking about gross fiscal deficit, which is commonly known as the fiscal deficit, it is the difference between the government's total expenditure and its total non-borrowed receipts. So here this terms become important, that total non-borrowed receipts are subtracted, and the excess of, again, expenditure over the revenue is how we calculate the fiscal deficit. And in case of primary deficit, so it is the gross fiscal deficit reduced by the gross interest payments. So when you subtract the gross interest payments from the fiscal deficit, you get the gross primary deficit. Then talking about the annual financial statement. So the budget, formally it is known as annual financial statement, and Article 112 of the Constitution talks about it. So it shows that the estimated revenues and the expenditure of the government for a financial year, net of refunds and the recoveries, is what is presented in the annual budget. And finance bill, so finance bill, it details the imposition, abolition, remission, alteration, or regulation of the taxes. So everything related to taxes is included in the finance bill, and finance bill is a component of the annual budget, and it is mentioned in the Article 110 of the Constitution. And finance bill is a money bill also. Then the Consolidated Fund of India, Contingency Fund, and the Public Account. So Consolidated Fund of India, it is the receipts and the disbursements, they are shown under three parts. So Consolidated Fund of India, contingency fund in the public account, and all the revenues that are received by the government and the loans raised by it, and also the receipts from the recoveries of the loans granted by the government, they together form the Consolidated Fund of India. So all the expenditure of the government that is incurred from the Consolidated Fund of India, and no amount can be done from it without authorization from the parliament. So to spend money out of Consolidated Fund of India, the government needs authorization from the parliament. And in case of contingency fund, so as the name is self-explanatory, that it is to meet urgent unforeseen expenditure by the government, we have the contingency fund. And the obviously you need parliament's approval, but that is, we can say, ex post facto, after you do the expenditure, because obviously it is to meet some emergency requirements. So you need to do the expenditure on immediate basis, and then parliament can later on approve the usage. And also an equivalent amount is drawn from the Consolidated Fund of India, that is put into the contingency fund, and the size is around rupees 30,000 crores at present. Then talking about the public account. So public account here, wherever in economics you see the word public, so that is regarding the government. So here the money that is held by the government in trust, that is kept in this account, that is public account, which is created under article 266. And public account, the public account funds that do not belong to the government, so they have to be finally paid back to the persons and authorities who deposited them. They don't require the parliament's approval for withdrawal. So that is there. And talking about the fiscal policy or the FRBM Act, so keeping public debt within reasonable levels, addressing the national emergencies, and creating the conditions for private enterprises are among some the goals that we can say the union government needs to keep an eye on, and push more of, we can say, investment in the economy, ensure that the economy is functioning in a healthy manner. So this calls for a suitable fiscal policy which is attuned to the times, to the current situation that is there. And India's fiscal policy is enunciated in the Fiscal Responsibility and the Budget Management Act of 2003. So the act, it set a target of fiscal deficit of around 3% of the GDP and elimination of the revenue deficit targets, but that has been missed because of COVID-19 pandemic. And right now the budget estimate for financial year 2023 for fiscal deficit is 6.4% of the GDP. Then talking about the revenue and the capital budgets. So combined both these, when we combine the revenue and the capital budget, they together form the union budget, or as we just saw, we call it as the annual financial statement. So the revenue budget, it does not alter the government's assets and liabilities, whereas the capital budget does. So understanding it, its further components, so we further divide the capital budget into capital receipts and capital expenditure, and likewise revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. So capital receipts, basically this includes the market borrowings and other loans, but it also the non-debt receipts, like the proceeds from disinvestment, the sale of the government assets, and recovery of loans. So all these, they form the component of the capital receipts. And in case of revenue receipt, so the revenue receipt, it includes mostly the tax revenues, but also non-tax revenues also. So it includes the interest payments that is earned by the government, the dividend on the investments that is made by the government, and fees and other receipts for the services that it renders. So all these form the component of the revenue receipts. So here it becomes important for PT that you should be clear with which all components fall within which part of the budget. And then capital expenditure, so this creates or it reduces the government's assets or liabilities. Mostly it creates government assets. So it consists of expenditure on acquisition of assets like land, buildings, machinery, and equipment. So we can say that capital expenditure is important. It promotes more of economic development, it attracts more of investment and creates more job opportunity. So capital expenditure is definitely important for an economy. And talking about the revenue expenditures, so this is incurred for the normal running of the government. So it includes administrative expenses, it includes salary, pensions, and subsidies. So all these are component of revenue expenditure, but they do not lead to creation of asset. So that's why we always focus more upon increasing capital expenditure and keeping the revenue expenditure within reasonable limits. And tax revenue, so all the revenue that is collected by the government from the taxes imposed on income, on profits from the direct and indirect sources, so that forms the component of the tax revenue. So I hope the meaning of all these terms is clear, and you can go through this once again on your own, and you can pause the video and just read the highlighted portion once again to be clear with the meaning of each and every term. And I would again emphasize that this is very, very important for you to be clear with. And let's take up Mint. So in Mint, also we'll be looking at what has been the tax trends of the government. So center has been conservative in estimating the tax mop up in recent years. So we see that in 2021-22, the blue bar is showing the budgeted estimate that the government expected, but the pink graph or the pink, you can say the bar is showing the actual revenue that has been collected by the government. So we can see that the actual tax revenue that has been collected by the government, it surpasses the estimates of the government. So that is, we can say, a good performance by the economy, by the businesses. And so you can see that over a period of time from 2012-13, the actual tax revenue, it has been increasing. However, we can say because of COVID-19, it halted and it remains stagnant at one level. And after that also, we are seeing an increase in the tax revenue of the government. So looking at the share of different components of tax revenues that are collected by the government. So how we, obviously question can be asked in arranging the in chronological manner, or as per the share of the different tax components that are collected by the government. So we see that earlier corporate tax had the highest share, then we saw it was followed by GST, then income tax, and then the union excise duty. But over a period of time, we are seeing that GST has been overtaking the corporate tax, and GST is indirect tax also. So economists, they do not feel that it is suitable that the indirect tax should have a larger share, because we say that indirect taxes, they are regressive in nature and they are burden on the poor people. So that is there, and you should be knowing about the shares. So firstly, we have GST as the highest contribution, then it is followed by corporate tax, then we have income tax, and then we have the union excise duty. So that's how we can say the share is right now, and this is important for you to be knowing about this. And there's one more, we can say, data that is there. So firstly, this one is showing that the slowing GDP growth could crunch the fiscal space in the current financial year, the subsequent financial year. And in this, you can see that the fiscal deficit, which is shown by the pink bar diagram, and it has been increasing. And this is because of COVID-19. And this blue line or blue graph is showing the trend of the nominal GDP growth. So you can see how our nominal GDP has been performing. And also in this bar diagram, you'll be seeing the trend of the government's receipts, the government's expenditure, and the fiscal deficit. So receipts, they have been increasing. Expenditure is almost around the same level. And the fiscal deficit, it is, we can say, it has been reduced when we compare it to the levels of 2018-19 and then 19-20. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining Ansarkari, and I hope that you're clear with so many things that we discussed today, and you'll get the PDF link in the description box. So go through that also, and see you tomorrow. But do not forget to subscribe to Ansarkari.